I would rather be somewhere warm. And I'd rather be somewhere where more people look like me, right? And I'd rather be somewhere where I don't have to perform. And you know what I mean.
I
You
do.
don't have to perform. You can just be yourself.
Yes.
Uh, my train's on time, my bus is on time, but I kind of like my driver in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. The comfort. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So I prefer to have a driver, a cleaner, whatever, all the things that makes your life more comfortable in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, you have to put up with some inconveniences.
Ndewono, Sanu, Ekabo, thank you for joining us. So today with me is someone who is a dear friend, and he has been in the, how will I say, how will I say this now? He's been an incredible friend, but then he's also lived a journey that people don't normally live or people talk about. He's Jamaican, but he has lived in Nigeria for a while. So he's an immigrant, but then an immigrant in Nigeria, which most people are not used to hearing about. So I'll be talking to the general manager of EbonyLife Place, Michael Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. The first question that I'm going to ask you is, what gives you joy?
Waking up every day and realizing that I'm healthy, that I'm whole. I have pretty much everything that I need. And anything that I don't have, I know I can get it relatively easily. And so my first thing every morning, usually before I even open my eyes, is a prayer of gratitude for everything that I have. And if I have time, if it's not a sort of rushed morning, I will go all the way back to my friends, my family, my teachers, every sort of work colleague, investor in a business I was in, everybody who ever gave me an opportunity to have a job. Um, I literally thank God for all of those people because I know that I wouldn't be here without them. So I'm literally grateful for everybody and everything. I even give thanks for all my challenges over the years because those are the things that have made me stronger and made me better and more resilient at what I do. So I'm honestly always grateful for everything.
What were you searching for when you came to Nigeria?
I wasn't searching for anything. They were searching for me.
Oh, okay. Tell
So,
me more.
so, so I'll take you back. Let's see how far we go back. Okay, so I'm in London. I have a marketing company, but one of my side gigs, if you like, is that I was on the board of the London Notting Hill Carnival.
Mm,
And as a member of the board, I was in charge of the marketing aspect, get it sponsorship, marketing, and so on. But like any member of the board, a big part of what we were doing is basically just making sure that the at the time the carnival with the biggest attendance in Europe, or in fact, I think it was the biggest cultural event in Europe as far as attendance was concerned, over 1 million people on the streets of Notting Hill every year. It was just to make sure it was safe, make sure that it worked well, and hopefully it always increased in its impact on the London cultural scene. So while I was doing that, a call came into the office one day. And by the way, it's an unpaid role.
okay.
But I got a call one day from the Carnival office, saying that there was a carnival in Nigeria that was inviting us to come and see it. And that was Carnival Calabar. And I'd never heard of it. I certainly didn't know there were carnivals in Africa because for us, carnival is a very South American, Caribbean kind of thing, Brazil, Trinidad, Jamaica, and so on. And so I was kind of intrigued by that. So I said, who else is going? And I learned that all the members of the board were too busy to go, or maybe they didn't want to go. I don't know, but everybody said no. And so I was the last person they called. So I
Okay.
think they called all the more senior people first.
Mm.
Some people were getting ready for Trinidad Carnival in February. This was in December, by the way. So anyway, nobody could go. So I said, well, I've been traveling a lot that year. My wife at the time, now ex-wife, I promised her that I was not going to travel anymore. I was just going to stay home for Christmas. And even our tradition of going to Jamaica at the end of the year, I said, we'll do that in January when things quieten down, fares are cheaper, let's go then. So I said, well, look, I can go, but only if I get 2 tickets. So they went away, came back and said, yes, got 2 tickets. And so I said, yes. And my feeling was that I'd heard so many negative things about Nigeria that it was best to go and see for myself. So that's how I came to be in Nigeria. I was invited and I came, I saw, thought it was fabulous. The pound of flesh that they required from me was to write a report at the end of it. So I sent my report and said, one, it was fantastic, but two, I could see a lot of gaps in terms of the potential for more tourism. And just to understand why I was able to say that is because at the time I was consulting for the Jamaica Tourist Board.
Mm.
So I was based in London, and I was part of my job was to take journalists from the UK to Jamaica to have a great time and to write about it or, do their film on, whether it's MTV or BET or the BBC or something like that. And so I gave my thoughts about tourism and what was possible. Anyway, I stayed in touch with the people from Cross River. They would sometimes pass through London on the way to Trinidad, where they used to get their training for carnival costume making and adjudicating the carnival and all of that. And, the Cross River invested a lot in that carnival. So I would see the people, I would help them with contacts to get things done in London, and they were sort of grateful for that. And at some point, probably maybe about a year later, I got a call from them saying that the governor was looking for a tourism consultant and that they remembered this report that I wrote talking about tourism. Would I be interested? So I said yes. And so I put together a proposal and I sent it off. And I got a call back saying, come and present. So they flew me back to Nigeria to make a presentation. I didn't know at the time what everything was. I now know I was presenting to what would have been the executive council, the exco
Mhm.
of Cross River and the governor. And so made my presentation. Again, thankfully, I didn't know I was competing against some top international consultancies. I probably would have been so scared. I didn't know. So pitched, and the governor heard everything and he looked very serious. And I thought, okay, I've really messed up, right? And he said, this is probably the most sensible, straightforward thing we've heard all day.
Mm.
I think, and he made the decision on the spot.
Okay.
And so I went back to London and then subsequently got a contract to come back and forth to Nigeria for a year. So every month I was in Nigeria. I was also flying back and forth to Jamaica for that assignment. So it was a year of constant travel. And then about a year after that, I met with the governor and he said, look, you're giving us great advice. It's not necessarily being implemented the way I want it. Why don't you just come and run the tourism bureau? And at the time, there was an acting head of the bureau. They didn't have a permanent head. So I said, nah, I don't know. Living in Nigeria looked so hard, you know. So I had visions of generating my own electricity, pumping my own water.
Excuse me.
Because that's what I saw, you know. I was, as a consultant, I was living this very privileged life. You know, I was staying in the presidential lodge.
Okay.
Everything was done for me. You know, driver picks you up, you get back, dinner's made, everything. You know, so, but
They were throwing
but
you into
living as an
reality.
independent person, I now had visions of going to the well. You know, I don't know. You know, all the stuff that Nigerians have to do to survive. So I said no.
Oh, you did?
I did. I said no. And then I said, look, let me just continue working with the team here. And, when you get a CEO eventually, a MD of the Tourism Bureau, happy to work with them. And he said, okay. Months passed, met with him again at some point, and he said, and I said, look, we're still struggling to find this managing director. And he said, well, you know the answer. And
Mhm,
I'm like, yeah, but I've been thinking about it,
mhm,
and some of the team at the bureau had been lobbying me to come, and I had a discussion with my now ex-wife, and she said, look, uh, if this is a good opportunity for you, you should go. I'm not coming, but you can go. And so I went back to the governor and I said, look, I, 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 I I'd like to come, but there are all these issues. And, Leo Limoke was the governor at the time, and he sat me down and we spent a long time. And he was just very realistic. He said, I can't promise you that everything's going to work out. I can't promise you that you'll get all the money that you need. But if you need it for something important, we'll find the money. Even if we have to borrow it, so and he just kind of reassured me. And I said, okay, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? I don't like it, or I can't do it, or it doesn't work out. I can just leave, right?
yeah.
So, so I agreed to come, and so that's how I got to be in Nigeria. And it was only supposed to be for a couple of years, by the way. I thought, get in, get out, you know.
No, we held you, we grabbed you, and we've stuck onto you. You
Yeah.
actually segued into my next question. So I was going to ask you, I'm still going to ask you because when you first arrived in Nigeria, what was your biggest misconception and about the country and what completely changed your mind?
Biggest misconception. Hmm. I don't know if there was any biggest. I think there was just that general Western narrative about Africa and, the poverty and the this and the that. And all of it is true. So let
Mhm.
me just be clear. The Western narrative is true. It's just not the whole truth.
Okay.
And so poverty and wealth and opportunity can coexist side by side,
Just like the
just
Western
like
world.
just like in the West.
Yeah.
So, we all have heard about Silicon Valley and the tech billionaires, in fact, traveling right now with President Trump and all of that. But if anybody looks closely, they'll also see the homelessness capital of the world is in San Francisco and
Which
Silicon
I've
Valley.
lived in for years. So yes,
Yes.
you are absolutely right.
So and I've never seen people living on the street like that in Nigeria, in the numbers and in that sort of visibility that you see in one of the most prosperous places on earth.
That's true.
So, that it was the whole Western narrative I had been fed that you kind of just thought. And then, of course, coming in and out as a consultant, I saw the unnecessary difficulty of living in Nigeria. I mean, why can't you have electricity? Why can't you have water? The basics. Yeah, the other things, but the basics should really be there. So I guess that was the only thing that I saw. But so the misconception was really that that's all there was, the Western narrative. And what I came to realize was that there was so much more to Nigeria, much more complex picture. And the thing that I became to admire most, I think, about Nigeria was two things. One, it was how industrious and entrepreneurial that Nigerians are, starting businesses against all odds and managing to create fortunes for themselves, or at least, a very good living. And I think the second thing that I saw was just the generosity and the friendliness of the people, and how easy they made it to live. And the truth is, until I opened my mouth, and no one even treated me like a foreigner. I'd be on a flight to, I don't know, Abuja or somewhere, and from Lagos, I'm sorry, from Calabar, and there'd always be some guy that would come and sit beside me and say, "Are you one of the," and they'd call a family name from, I don't know, Enugu or somewhere. And I'd be like, "No, no, no, no." And then, "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I think I'm sure that I'm not from a village in the East." So, or someone would say, "Are you from," and they think I'm from some family in the North. No, just trust me. I Yeah, I'll check with my folks. No, where I'm not right. So the fact that I could also sort of blend in, kind of helped me to see Nigeria in a different way as a foreigner, as an expatriate. Because I'm observing from the inside, and as long as I didn't say anything and didn't give myself away, and then even when I did speak, people would think maybe I was just a Nigerian who lived abroad and came back.
That is true.
So, yeah.
I can relate to that with them saying, "Are you from a family from the East?" Because in Enugu, there are a lot of families that have blended. So they
Yes.
have a lot of mixed race families that, you know, and yes, I would see them asking you that because there are a lot of Caucasian wives that bore children that, affect
Yeah.
confession. So I would see them asking you that. Okay. Was there a moment in Nigeria where you stopped feeling like a visitor and started feeling emotionally connected to the people and culture?
Was there a moment? Um, hmm, I think it might have been when I came to Lagos.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
in, in Cal-
how long were you already in Nigeria before you came to Lagos?
so I was in Calabar for 5.5 years,
Okay.
and that position, that whole arrangement ended because of the way Nigeria works. The government changed.
Sadly.
Yeah, and the new governor didn't want any experts, any expatriates, any consultants. He wanted people from his village
Mm-hmm.
to run everything.
Mm-hmm.
And even contractors that were there at the time, he stopped paying them. It was, I was owed several months, and I went almost broke trying to get my money,
Mm-hmm.
and I never got it. And the new governor didn't particularly care that so many of us, were not paid, and including contractors who were building the convention center at the time, were not paid. So that's the kind of difficult part of that transition. But when I came to Lagos, um, I just felt more like I just blended in. in Calabar, I felt like I was always the sort of the outsider expatriate, you know, very well accepted and everything. There was nothing negative about it, but I always felt sort of very other, you know, but people were very sort of nice to me, no issues. But Lagos, I wasn't treated like an outsider. I was just like, hey, you know, you're just one of us. You just happen to be from somewhere else, but you know, whatever. And I think it's because Lagos is so full of people who are from other places. You know, the people of Lebanese origin who are probably, you know, maybe second generation Nigerian, even though Nigerians don't unfortunately refer to them in that way. Indians the same, you know, maybe their grandfather came from India, but they're two generations deep. Then there's also all the Nigerians who are not really Nigerian because they spent so long abroad and came back.
Yeah.
And so I found myself in the midst of, you know, lots of people who were not sort of Nigerians from birth all the way through. Unlike in Calabar, with, you know, the majority of people you meet are very much, you know,
Mhm.
like that. I think that's the time I started to feel very just normal, if you like, just part of every. I stopped thinking of myself as a stranger in town, if you like. And I think the other thing that really helped was I didn't realize how many people I'd met in Calabar
Mhm.
who are from Lagos, or all my trips to Lagos at the time on government business, how many people I'd met. It hadn't really registered. And so suddenly, anywhere I was going in Lagos, and hey, Michael, how are you doing? Hi. You know, people were just greeting me. And I was like, suddenly I'm thinking, how do I know so many people? I just got here. And so that was a really kind of, that was something that made me feel very much at home.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. You have been in Nigeria for what, close to 10 years? Would that be
This is my
right?
16th year.
Wow. See, look at that. Your
My
journey
first year of
here,
living here was 2010.
your journey here is almost legal, I would say. I mean, 2 years, you will be
Yeah,
18, be able to drive.
I guess.
That is incredible. A lot of people talk about the highs and lows of being an immigrant. So having to navigate the work permit, having to navigate being in residence, having to just have a free flow of life. Like, I mean, what's happening in the US and the UK. What is that like in Nigeria? Walk us through your immigration journey in Nigeria.
Um, None of the above. Uh, none
Okay.
of the above. Being an immigrant in Nigeria, an expatriate, if you want to call it that, and that's the first thing I want to say is people like me have the privilege of being an expatriate
Okay.
in Nigeria. There's no
Okay.
Nigerian going abroad that's referred to as an expatriate.
That's true.
You're you're an immigrant.
You're
So
an
that's the
immigrant.
first thing that you realize that moves along sort of color lines is, and although I'm black, Nigerians still treat anyone foreign as an expatriate. In America, as you know, an expatriate will always be someone white, from someone from Australia, someone from, you know, whatever, but not a black person's an immigrant. You've come here to give us wahala. So, you know, you're an immigrant. God damn it, right? Um, so for me, I would say being an immigrant in Nigeria, yeah, there are minor irritations,
Like what?
mostly mostly to do with money.
Okay.
You know, it's really just about how much money can they collect from
Mm,
you being an immigrant. And I think it's misplaced. And I'm not saying we shouldn't be charged. That's not what I'm saying.
mhm,
But what I am saying is I think there should be a more concerted effort to for us to pay more to Nigeria in terms of our expertise, in terms of training other people, you know, all the transferable skills. So you don't just come here and take a job forever. You should come and be paid well to do whatever you're doing. Of course, pay for your immigration, but it would be much better if it was kind of structured that they said, look, you've got to train somebody else to at least be the successor for your job so that when you eventually leave, we don't have to bring another one like you
True.
in. And whether that tenure is 5 years or 10 years, that's another technical issue depending on the field is. But I think that would be much more useful than just seeing if they can extract another $1,000 for you being here, because it would have much more impact. So, but having said all of that, it's so much easier. So when you might travel abroad as an immigrant, of course, you're gonna have all the issues. For me coming here, it was very simple. The Cross River State government would get the um, permits, the visas, whatever I needed. So I was coming in and out of visas for a long time, and eventually transitioned into getting a residence permit, which is the green card,
Mhm.
which is renewed every year for a fee. And a lot of the pressure is more on your employer than really on you personally.
Okay.
So they have a quota of expatriates, so they have to prove why they need these people, because the people are not here in Nigeria. Once they prove that and they have their quota of 10 people or 15 people or whatever it is, they then have to pay for each of those people's visas or green cards or whatever it is. So that has been done for me. So
That's what, yearly?
yeah, that's yearly. And so that's never been an issue for me personally. It just gets done for me. Someone says, "Hey, Michael, I need your passport. I need this. I need that." And then they come back and they say, "Here's your passport back. Here's your green card."
Mhm.
And life goes on. But the HR would have had the stress of figuring all that out, and the employer would be bearing the cost of that. Nowadays, in the last coming up to 4 years now, I've been married to a Nigerian.
Mhm.
And so that's changed my status a little bit. There's a special immigration status, which means that green card lasts for, I think, up to 5 years. So I don't have to renew. It's either 3 years or 5 years, I can't remember, but you don't have to renew as often. And it's not as costly, obviously. The irony of that, though, is that as a man married to a Nigerian woman, um, it's much harder for me to become a Nigerian, as if it was a Nigerian man married to a Nigerian woman, she could
Really?
become a citizen pretty much instantly.
Really? So once, if I was a man and I married a woman who is not Nigerian, immediately
Yes,
I'm married, I just have to do the paperwork and they are Nigerians.
yes.
So
I don't know
for
how long it takes, but it's pretty much very quickly. Yeah.
so now that the reverse is the case for you, what do you ever get to be a Nigerian? What is that
I, I,
process like?
I've
Um,
heard, I've heard it's 10 years, 15 years. I've heard it's never. But the thing is, that's how you know that Nigeria is very much a patriarchal society.
that is true.
And so everything's geared for men. And you imagine that the laws are passed by male politicians who want to be free to marry the women of their choice and have their Nigerian children and so on and so forth. And they don't want you to have that privilege because you might not choose that.
Mhm.
So yeah.
So there is no law for a timeline or process of how long you would become a Nigerian if you marry a woman that is
There,
Nigerian.
there is, like I said, there is, I've been told it's 10 of, I've just not looked into it. And
Okay.
that part of the law is a little bit opaque. And
Mm,
so maybe I've not been that concerned. As long as I get to be here legally.
hmm
I'm not clamoring for a Nigerian passport. for obvious reasons. It doesn't have the power beyond my British passport or my Jamaican passport. So I have both. And the funny thing is, my Jamaican passport gets me into some countries better than my British passport, and the British passport works for most countries. But there are a few countries, including in Africa,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't even need a visa because of my Jamaicanness, not because of my Britishness.
Yeah. Okay. That is painful to hear that you don't, well, you didn't say that you don't want our Nigerian passport. You just tied it in a nice ribbon. So, but that's okay.
No, so I'd truth is, I'd like to have one, make it easy when I get back into the country, but I'm just saying it's not something that's going to make a material difference to my life.
Yes, yes.
That's
And you're someone that actually does enjoy traveling. So it'll be nice to, when you're coming in, to have the ease of that. Is that really stressful though, if you don't have a
no,
Nigerian
no, no. That's not say it's
passport?
not that stressful. And in some cases, even though you have to go through more as a foreigner coming back into Nigeria, but you but the line's shorter. So if I come in on a flight and there's, I don't know, 400 people on the flight or 300 people, maybe 20 of us are not Nigerian.
Mm,
So I might still get out into the baggage area before most of the other passengers just because it's three or 400 of them. It's changing a little bit though, because when I just came back last weekend, um, I my wife was able to just scan her passport and go through the gates,
okay.
not have to do that dance of go
Talking
to
to
this
several
guy, go to
people.
that guy, go back to that guy, queue here, queue there, and so on. It was just very straightforward, scan and go. So hopefully, those things change the travel journey for all of us over time.
Are there cultural similarities that you've noticed between Nigerians and Jamaicans while living
Yeah,
here?
there are lots. There are lots.
Mm-hmm.
Starting with my first visit in 2007, when I came for the carnival,
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first day of the carnival is the cultural carnival. The second day is what everybody sees, all the girls in all the glittery costumes. But the first day is where all the states around Nigeria would send a troupe
Mm-hmm.
representing their culture in whichever state they were from. And I remember coming out and I started to see these costumes coming. And I was like, hold on, that's John Canoe. And John Canoe is Jamaica, that's something that happens at Christmas time.
Okay.
Um, and so the whole masquerade thing that you guys have where people dress up and children run under their mom's skirts and whatever. And it's the same thing in Jamaica. Christmas time,
Mm-hmm.
not in the city, but in the villages.
Mm-hmm.
There's still this thing where John Canoe and all of the masquerade things, they come out and they do this, and I recognized it on the streets of Calabar from something that I had seen video and photographs of things that happened in Jamaican small towns and villages. And also when you have cultural days in Jamaica, you might see that as well. And and I recognized it. And so as I started to look at the things that looked almost the same as what I'd seen in Jamaica, and the same things play out in the Bahamas and Trinidad and other places, and then I noticed the similarities with the carnival. And there was a lot of criticism in those days for Donald Duke, the former governor, and then Leo Inoke, who I was working with, that they had taken this Caribbean thing and
Mm-hmm.
transplanted it into Nigeria. And I remember giving a speech one day, and I was asked about this thing. And I said, look, one of the questions from the floor was, why are we doing this Caribbean thing here? And I said, oh, look, my perspective is completely different. you have to understand that enslaved people took these traditions to Jamaica, Trinidad, and
Mm-hmm.
I recognized this, and I said, "How the?" And then I realized that what I was watching is the traditions that everybody who was enslaved had taken to the Caribbean
Yeah.
and had then converted it into something else. So some parts of it stayed the same.
Mm-hmm.
There are other parts of it where Africans were now dressing up as their European slave masters and making fun of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what that whole thing of carnival was built on. So I remember once when I was making a speech in Calabar, and in the Q&A afterwards, someone asked me, they'd accused Donald Duke, the former governor, and the governor at the time, Leah Lamoke, of transplanting this Caribbean festival into Nigeria and calling it a carnival. And I had a different perspective, and I said, look, as a Jamaican, I've seen the cultural carnival, I've seen the masquerades, and we have exactly the same thing in Jamaica and other islands. The thing that you now think is a transplant are just the traditions that we took as enslaved people to the Caribbean. Of course, we added our own flavor to it, whether you're Brazilian or Jamaican or Trinidadian, uh, but we made it our own, and then it's just come back home. And so that was the first cultural similarity I saw, was just through that. The other similarities are with food. Again, 95% probably of Jamaicans are of African descent. Most of us came from the coast, somewhere between Calabar, Badagry, and the Gold Coast, the Slave Coast in Ghana. That's where most Jamaicans come from.
Okay.
And so we're a mixture of mostly modern day Ghanaian and Nigerian, even though those countries didn't exist at the time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so we have we the yams are there, so we eat yams. We what you call zobo, we call sorrel. And so that same red drink with ginger,
Okay.
with cloves, it's part of our thing. And our national fruit in Jamaica is the ackee, which does come from Ghana, but also I've seen it here. So a lot of the foods, the plantains, all of those things um, really do come from here. And then where you have the smoked fish,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have the smoked fish, but we had salt fish, which is
Okay.
like your stockfish,
Yeah.
and we cook with that with the grit. So yeah, a lot of similarities around food. The music, of course, any music with a rhythm in the world comes from Africa, and so reggae.
Excuse me.
A lot of reggae and our the music that preceded reggae, the mento, the rock steady, etc., were all African rhythms
Mm-hmm.
reinterpreted, of course, for our own local context, which
Mm-hmm.
is why they don't sound strange to you, and why the likes of Wizkid and Burna Boy and all these guys, they have a lot. In fact, many of them started as almost reggae artists,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so that cultural exchange back and forth is centuries old. It's not new.
While living in Nigeria, has there been time when you've felt lonely, like you've had loneliness because it's just you and your families either in the UK or back in Jamaica? And how did you navigate that?
Um, yeah, loneliness is a part of the expatriate story, because many of us, our wives don't come. And in my case, that was true. My wife didn't want to come. She'd come back and forth, a week, 2 weeks. I
Vacation.
would go, she would come, all that sort of thing. But she wouldn't be here permanently.
Mm-hmm.
She just didn't want to live in Nigeria. Perfectly understandable. I couldn't hold that against her. And so, yeah, that loneliness, and it comes out in the most in the simplest of ways. Just that whole thing, you have a tough day and you come home and there's no one to talk to. There's no sort of inside jokes that you can share. It's
Yeah.
just the simplest things. And and so the truth is that inevitably, to counteract that, you end up, developing another life,
Mm,
which is kind of why my wife at the time is now my ex-wife. You develop another life, and against everything you probably believe in, it kind of happens. And maybe someone stronger and more virtuous than me may have been able to survive it, but the first few years, yeah, you can survive it, but then inevitably life takes over. The times when you can't do the back and forth because one or the other or both is busy,
mhm.
and yeah, and life just kind of changes in that way. So yeah, loneliness is a part of the journey.
I read an article that for immigrants, or let's say expatriates, that when you go back and forth, you have very minimal time with loved ones, especially parents, because you're maybe able to come once or twice a year, and that limits how many times you see them in a lifetime. And that's painful to actually calculate. So you're like doing the math calculation of how many times you see family. And this is because you're chasing dreams. What was that like for you, for your own parents and your siblings?
So I can't really put it in a Nigerian context, and here's why.
Okay.
I left Jamaica when I was 18 years old to
Mm,
go to London. I didn't grow up with my father. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and so my father was always in the UK. So when I went to join him at 18, um, which didn't work out very well, it lasted just a few months, and so my brother and I have a brother who was a year older. We were very much on our own, and we had the option of going back to Jamaica, and we declined. We said we'd figure it out, and we did. So the difference for me is that I've been missing my friends and my family since I was 18, and I've been living without them since that time. And I just have my brother as someone I'd grown up with. I did have some relatives who were very, very kind to me. My aunt, some of my cousins, and so on my father's side, who were very, very kind to me, and that really helped. But in terms of what you're talking about, that connection with people you've left behind,
mhm.
I left that behind at 18 and spent 30 years in the UK, going back and forth. So but I'm proud to say, within that period, I think I'd gone to Jamaica maybe up to 50 times
Mhm.
in those 30 years. Certainly at least every year at Christmas, and then once or twice when I became a little bit more affluent. I could afford to go 2 or 3 times a year. But in those early days, it was at least once a year. And you did the connection. Back then, you would write letters, which then eventually became emails, and then now the WhatsApps and whatever make it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've been dealing with that my whole life. So coming to Nigeria didn't make it any harder, except for the fact that I have to travel longer when I go and connect.
Okay. What part of Nigerian culture challenged you the most, personally and professionally?
Wow. I think there's two things.
Mm,
One is the and it's a modern, and I need to clarify, this is a modern phenomenon for Nigerian culture, and it's dishonesty.
mm,
Um, you know, everybody wanting to get one up on you, everyone to be smarter than you.
Okay.
If you're Nigerian, you know what being smart really means.
Street talk.
And and the institutional corruption.
Mhm.
And the problem I have with it is because it's not really the nature of the majority of the people, but somehow it's become so institutionalized that it appears to be
Mm.
a Nigerian thing. But the truth is that it's become so legitimized that it becomes part of the fabric of the society because everything gets affected by it. But if you are just dealing with Nigerians on a day-to-day basis, there's so many good people that it just kind of sad that the way the government works, the way a lot of things work, is just always tainted by this corruption, which has become part of the fabric of the society. So that's the first thing I think is difficult. The second thing that's difficult is probably just somehow there's just been this decline, and I rely on my Nigerian friends who tell me about a time when places like Lagos were clean
Mm.
and relatively orderly,
Okay.
and so I struggle to function in a society which doesn't value cleanliness and orderliness
Mm.
because it affects everything. It affects the business I'm in, tourism and hospitality. It affects everyone's daily lives. For some reason, people don't connect flooding in Lagos with just throwing everything into the gutters
Yeah,
and not
true.
caring. Somehow there's this disconnect. And then everybody puts it on the government that the government should. But, yes, I just came back from a trip to Japan and I saw one
I'm
piece of
sorry.
lit.
Do not compare us
I'm not
because
comparing, but
okay, because I'm gonna
I'm just
just be
gonna, no,
sad.
no, I'm just gonna make a point. But I saw one dropped cup. So I think a child dropped a cup with a straw. But
Mhm.
that's the only piece of litter I saw in 3 weeks.
Mhm.
3 weeks, and I was in several cities.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
saw nothing. Right. So the point is not that my point is not that Japan is such a organized
Mhm.
and or what do you call it, structured society that they clean so well. It's just that the culture is that nobody drops anything.
Mhm.
And so, because there's sometimes this narrative in Nigeria about the government should do better because all these governments abroad do better,
They
and
don't.
and they don't necessarily. But when you go to places like Japan or Singapore or even Kigali in Rwanda,
Mhm.
and you realize that it's discipline and culture.
It
And I think
is.
so. That's the thing I struggle with the most is just
Mhm.
being in a where I can't go to a nice park. I can't walk in my neighborhood because the drainage is stinking.
Mm.
And I live in Lekki, which is supposed to be, but you could be in Ikoyi, you could be in Lekki, you could be in VI. It's as dirty as the rest of the country. And so that's a struggle I have.
Okay. I'm gonna be a bit defensive now,
Sure.
but it's not necessarily because of that is Nigeria. It's when I moved to San Francisco, a lot of people asked me, "Oh, what do you think of the place? What do you think of the place?" And the first words out of my mouth was, "It's overrated." And I'll tell you why. A
Yeah.
lot of places in San Francisco smells like piss. A lot of places smells like there's a lot of, you know,
But America is not a clean place. Let me just be
it's
clear
not.
about it. New
Okay.
York is not clean. Paris is not clean.
Like it's so
So we know that. Yeah.
and it's not even only just that, this, like you said, the homelessness that you talked about. And I remember one time someone parked in front of my apartment and left a note by the window of their car. And the note read, "Please don't break my window. My car is open. There's nothing in it." And I found it so hilarious because people, I mean, in Nigeria, yes, you would find one or two break-ins, but it wasn't something that is in my face.
London the same, by the way. Like when I lived in London, uh, I I think I had my car broken into at least twice, and almost everybody I knew had a car broken into at least once.
Mhm.
So, but here's the thing: it's not really. Your question was, what do I
No, no, no.
find?
I know.
No,
That's
no.
what I
I
said.
hold
I
on, hold on, hold on.
okay,
Just,
okay.
what do I find?
Yes.
That I struggle
Yes.
with in Nigeria.
Yes.
But you could ask me the same question about London, and I'd tell you
Yes.
about London.
Yes.
I'd tell you about wherever I've lived, or
Yes.
So yeah. So
That's why I
don't
put
please
the
don't defend.
disclaimer. That's why I put the disclaimer that I was coming off a bit defensive because I know.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I know.
yeah.
So now let's go to the positive.
Yes.
How would you say Nigeria has changed you? Like that you've learned that has changed you as a human being? How would you say? Find the
How's
positive.
no, no, so sure. How has Nigeria changed me? I think um I think Nigeria has helped me to develop more empathy.
Okay.
That's one thing. I think being in Nigeria, uh, you're forced to try to understand other people's perspective much more,
Okay.
other people's circumstances much more, and other people's even their origin story in a different way. And so
Mhm.
when I'm dealing with people at work, people in business, whatever it is, I'm not as quick to judge as I used to be.
Mm.
I spend more time reflecting on how did that person get here? What would have made them think or feel or act in the way that I have? And so I'm less likely to take offense. I'm less likely to be judgmental. It's not that I don't see the thing, whatever it is, but I'm more inclined to be sympathetic to what may have caused that to happen and be more inclined to see how I can help in some way. So I think empathy would be the probably the most valuable thing that I've gotten from Nigeria. And it's not the only thing, but that would be, I think, the most valuable thing because it serves me well.
There are a lot, there's like a trend now of people of Black Americans or even other Africans that are outside the country, diasporians who romanticize, who was the word romanticize?
Romanticize.
Thank you. Romanticize, Africa from afar and wanting to come. What is the difference between imagining Nigeria and actually building a life here? Like,
Well, I'm not sure what they're romanticizing because, Nigeria or Africa
so let me give you,
has its
let me,
advantages and disadvantages. So
now I wanted to give you context. So a lot of them would say that they want to leave America and come live in Nigeria because of, they'll mention racism, they'll mention, the class structure. Maybe they feel like they're not, there's like an economic gap. They would mention Uncle Sam, so taxes, too many taxes in America. They would mention the dollar, so the value of the money that you've earned in America and then come and spend in Nigeria. They'll mention all these things, like I said, romanticizing it. So you that you've lived here, what would you say to that?
I would say that it's purely a matter of um, choose your poison.
Okay.
You move from one place to another, you swap one set of advantages for a different set of advantages. You swap a different set of disadvantages, right? There's no perfect place. It's really more what suits you.
Mm,
So, I mean, I'll give you an example. So, in other words, there are trade-offs. And in the end, it's not about this place is better than this place. It's about, are you comfortable with the trade-offs? And does it end up in a positive for you? So I'll give you an example from my life. I will trade a number of inconveniences in Nigeria for having warm weather all year round. Okay. So uh, I can be in London. Yeah, so I'll go to London, and my wife complains about this. We'll go to London, and she's like, can't we just stay for a few days? Why do you just want to change planes and go? Why is it only 3 days? Why is it? And I literally allow enough time in London to get something done that I need to get done. And then I'm off to wherever I'm going. And she says, and I'm like, no, I don't really. And, so my bus is on time, my train is on time, everything works really well. The streets are clean, all those things that I do enjoy and I value. But I would rather be somewhere warm. And I'd rather be somewhere where more people look like me,
mm,
kind of like me anyway, right? And I'd rather be somewhere where I don't have to perform. And you know what I mean?
I
You
do.
don't have to perform. You can just be yourself.
Yes.
Uh, my train's on time, my bus is on time, but I kind of like my driver in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. The comfort. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So, I prefer to have a driver, a cleaner, whatever, all the things that makes your life more comfortable in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, you have to put up with some inconveniences.
That is
And
true.
so for some people, those inconveniences are a deal breaker.
Mm-hmm.
And the comfort of these other things don't mean that much to them. So it totally depends on your lifestyle, the trade-offs. I might have a different view if I had children growing up here and going to school. But again, I could afford a really good school for them that might be better than the school I could afford for them in the UK. It's possible.
That is true. Yeah, that is.
So it's not, there's nothing to romanticize. I look around the world and I think, okay, where am I going next?
Mm-hmm.
And I see lots of countries that are attractive to me, have things Nigeria doesn't have, but they also don't have some of the things Nigeria has.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, if I do leave Nigeria to live somewhere else, including going back home to Jamaica, I will have to do those trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's how I see it.
I completely agree with you. When I was coming here, the grad school I went to had campuses in San Francisco and Boston. And Boston was a no-no for me because it snows. And I'm like, I'm, I like warm weather. San Francisco, yes, it's cold because it's a peninsula and then
Yes,
it's also on a hill. So you get the cold from the mountains and then the waterside. But then it doesn't snow
yes,
at all.
and it's relatively cold. It's not really cold.
Oh no, it
It's
was
not.
cold. I've moved out of San Francisco now. It was cold. When my son,
Yeah, no, I'm just saying it's not as cold as, for example, my sister lives in Toronto,
oh, okay,
and
no,
I
no,
visit
no,
I
no,
visit her in the summer if I can,
no,
because
no,
minus 20 is no fun. So I'm
no,
just saying
no. Yes,
I've been
yes,
to the West Coast and I know that parts that
yes.
but you have your warm months, it's not as bad as the East Coast or, whatever.
No,
So
no, it's not. But the thing is, with San Francisco, it's almost cold all year round.
yes,
And I mean, Oakland to San Francisco is like maybe like a 20 minutes drive but Oakland is way warmer, although in the
yes,
evenings it also cools down. But San Francisco is almost always cold, even when it's summer. it might warm up a bit, but then it's cold again, like it's just few days. But that's neither here or there. I think the universe just knows that I don't like cold weather because even when I went to visit my friend in New York, it didn't snow, and she told me it had been snowing. Myself and my son went there. It didn't snow. We left that day. The next day, she sent me a picture and it had snowed in.
Yeah, you just escaped.
It just escaped it. And I had told her that I'd actually never seen snow. But then she's like, can you imagine you left and then she did a video and everyone was white? I'm like, oh, that would have been nice. But I think the universe just knows that I don't like cold. So it
Yeah,
was really too cold for me. The snow would have just made it worse. So yes, I do understand your trade-off. Okay. If your younger self in Jamaica could see the life you've lived in Nigeria today, what do you think would surprise him the most?
my younger self.
Yeah, the young boy you left in Jamaica.
I think I don't know if he'd be surprised, but he'd probably be impressed.
Hmm, okay.
Because when I was back then, I always imagined myself living a prosperous life. I imagined having a butler to open the curtains for me in the morning.
Okay.
That was the kind of imagination I had back then as a kid. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that it all came true, but I that kid would be kind of proud and impressed that I'd actually made those things happen for myself.
Mhm.
Definitely impressed, to see me maybe running a company and achieving some level of success and hopefully treating people around me with some degree of kindness and empathy. Um, I think he would be proud of the fact that I've tried to keep my integrity in my business dealings and in my dealings with people. He'd probably be, yeah, maybe he'd be a little bit disappointed that I don't have children that look like him at his age, maybe. But yeah, I think he'd be pretty proud of what I've done, but he wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. So this is my final question. Well, my final question, but then I'm gonna also let me know, jump to that yet. If you were to describe your immigrant journey in a sentence, what would you say?
My immigrant journey in
Not the
Nigeria.
polished version, not the polished version.
No, no.
Yeah,
Well, I think
unedited.
you've known by this conversation. I'm
True. Yeah.
shooting pretty straight with you.
Okay. Yes. Yes. That is true.
Yeah. So my immigrant journey so far, I think, has been um, full of challenges that I've enjoyed wrestling with. It's been full of lots of delightful people and relationships and great opportunities that I hope I've made the most of. And I think more than anything, it's been one where I've always felt at home.
Mhm.
I've always felt at home.
Okay. So now I'm gonna give you the floor to also tell us about your podcast. Because I mean, I know that you're also passionate about this as well. So yeah.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Serve and Grow. So the Serve and Grow podcast is on YouTube, and it will soon be on Spotify and Apple. I think from this week or next week.
Mhm.
So far, I think we've posted somewhere between 8 and 10 episodes. They drop every week on a Friday evening.
Mhm.
And the podcast is really about service.
Okay.
How do you use service, customer service, to grow an enterprise? And so all of the people who I interview are either founders, CEOs, general managers, or some senior manager who runs an enterprise that interfaces with the public, and their success depends on great customer service. So I interview people who run restaurants, hotels. These are some of the top hotels and restaurants in Lagos. People who have worked in tourism in Dubai, people who run hospitals. So Evercare Hospital, for example, what I think is the best hospital in Lagos. The clinic, the director of that is interviewed. Um, People in tech that behind the scenes still have to provide customer service. In fact, the current uh, one that dropped last night, Ike who's a serial entrepreneur, was in Silicon Valley, by the way, had two successful startups and exits. You know, he managed to cash out, and he's continuing to invest in tech startups. So he's my guest on the current podcast. And so it's something I started in 2016 when I wrote the More Three Formula, which is available on Amazon. And that book was about how to use customer service to create exponential growth in an enterprise. And the More Three Formula was an Amazon bestseller at the time. And so I always wanted to bring that to life in a more fluid form that keeps moving. Because, you know, once you publish the book, it's done. The podcast keeps taking on new life. Each guest brings new insights. And what's been, I think, the most interesting thing for me is just hearing founders and senior managers talk about how much they're still personally involved. I mean, one example, you know, Lagoon Restaurant in Lagos.
Yeah.
That's a 36-year-old restaurant that's passed from father to son. And the son, Rami Shagari, if you go to seafood night on a Thursday, which I did a couple of months back, Rami's still on the floor, talking to guests, making sure everybody's okay, checking on his staff, making sure they're looking after everybody. And he's even advising on the seafood you should pick to have cooked. But even more so, the seafood that you're picking from, he went out on the boat that day and caught it.
Oh, okay.
So there's that
It's very
extreme kind of
intentional.
dedication to the customer service and the customer experience that someone like him does. And I kept hearing that repeated from an owner who's a chef, an owner who's, you know, a veteran of running hotels all over the world. And they still come back to that whole thing of personally seeing to the guest's satisfaction. And that's really what the podcast is all about.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. You have been phenomenal to take out this time and come talk to us on a different perspective. You know, immigrants, expatriates, kind of means the same thing, but one has a higher class, so
There's a racial political connotation to the difference. Yeah, for
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, and you have been awesome. I would let you know how things go. I'm just gonna sign off to the audience if you don't mind.
Okay.
So thank you so much for watching. You have been awesome. Like, subscribe, comments, let us know your thoughts on this. Are you an immigrant? Are you an expatriate? Your thoughts on this, and anything else that you want to bring to the conversation, you're always welcome. So thank you guys. Bye bye. Well, it was nice chatting with you, Michael.